Will have any questions for Mr. MacArthur? Seeing none, I'll ask if there are any members of the public who would like to make a presentation on this matter. Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chair, Your Worship, members of council, I'll be brief. As Mr. MacArthur stated, our clients have looked at this building and the possible uses of it and possible conversions. The building itself is not appropriate to converting to residential uses as it's presently designated. You know, it's a building that was constructed in the 50s, and to upgrade it to an apartment style building or something of that nature just would not be appropriate. It wouldn't be cost effective or doable. But in saying that, this is a perfectly good structure that can be used for a good use within the community as employment lands, and what we're proposing here is the highest and best use for this property. And we have had a great deal of consultation with staff dealing with the concerns of area residents in terms of possible uses, and have pared it down to something that is the least offensive possible in that, and certainly you know, would not adversely affect the surrounding areas. As Mr. MacArthur said, we will deal with parking issues through site plan control. There is a parking on the other side of Olive Street that was part of the purchase from the church. It was parking that was used for church parking lot when the church was operating, and is presently still a paved parking lot. We will have to designate the required number of spots for the square footage of office space that we will be providing. So we will address those issues. We will deal with city staff with regard to appropriate buffering to the adjoining neighbor. And I think that can all be accommodated to meet everybody's needs. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Any members of the committee have any questions for Mr. Miller? Councillor Main?
Thank you, Chair. It's really just a clarification, I guess, but Mr. Miller or even Mr. MacArthur, on the tax issue, as a religious institution, that would not have been a taxable property. Correct. Yep. Can you estimate what the taxes would be to the City of North Bay based on an estimate? Like, they're paying taxes now, I guess. What is the valuation?
I wouldn't know, Councillor. I can certainly follow up with you afterwards, just provide that information. I could check with the manager of taxation tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Miller? Thank you very much, Mr. Miller, for your presentation. Mr. MacArthur, thank you. Any members of the public wish to make a presentation? If I could ask, sir, for you to state your name and address for the record.
Can I get a drink of water first? I'm really thirsty. Let me just get myself settled in. Mr. Chair, Your Worship, members of council. For the record, my name is Phillip Penna, P-E-N-N-A. I live at 1450 Ski Club Road. I'm the former chairperson of the Corpus Christi Parish Pastoral Council and one of 5 members of the former Corpus Christi Parish who have made formal appeal to the Congregation for the Clergy in Vatican City in the matter of the sale of the former parochial church by the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie to Belisle Investments. I'm not going to read you my 2 pages. I'm going to summarize them. And I'll make a couple of comments given some of the questions. In the City of North Bay Planning Services report from November the 15th, submitted to the Advisory Committee, the solicitor, Peter Leckie, is quoted as saying the following. The rules of canon law have no binding effect on the corporation of the City of North Bay's authority to govern according to the powers conferred upon it by the province according to the Constitution. The parishioner's appeal to the Vatican does not prevent the city from receiving, reviewing, and approving the application presented by Belisle Investments Limited. With all due respect, and I say that sincerely, I want to say to you as council that I think Mr. MacArthur has been very fair. I think Mr. Leckie has been very thoughtful. I recognize this is not an easy matter for everybody, and so I do want to say, when I say all due respect, I mean that. I'm sincere, not just a formality. We beg to differ. That is, we contend that our appeal to the Vatican does prevent the city from being able to act according to its powers conferred upon it by the province. As I tried to explain in my submission, the reason is this. The city can only act according to these powers if the city knows for certain that Belisle Investments has legally acquired the property in question. Belisle Investments can only legally own it if the Episcopal Corporation of the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie was legally in a position to sell it. And the city can only know this for certain, and same with the Canadian courts or any other level of government in Canada, can only know this for certain if the judgment to be rendered by the Vatican is in favor of the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie. There is no other authority which exists which can render this judgment. This is why we appealed to the Vatican and not to the civil courts. If we had appealed to the civil courts and not to the Vatican, they would have thrown it out. If we had appealed to the civil courts in the Vatican, they would have said, well, we'll wait to hear what the Vatican has to say. So we didn't go to the civil courts, we went to the Vatican. And since the Vatican has not yet rendered its decision on the matter, the city cannot deal with the request for rezoning the property. You can neither, in our opinion, you can neither accept nor reject the request, because either decision would be predicated on the certainty that the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie legally had the right to sell this property to Belisle Investments or anyone else. Since the Vatican has not yet said this is true, such a certainty is without foundation. If you proceed as recommended by the Planning Advisory Committee, then you are saying that the city can decide whether or not the sale to Belisle Investments was legal and proper. The city does not have the power to make this decision because the rules which had to be followed by the diocese in order for them to be able to sell the land according to civil law are those set out in canon law. And only the church legal system can render a judgment on whether or not the diocese met the requirements of canon law. As the city solicitor rightly noted, canon law has no binding effect on the city. By extension, neither can the city make binding decisions on matters which are solely in the realm of canon law. Before it can act according to its own powers, City Council must be assured that the actions of a publicly recognized corporation, in this case, the Episcopal Corporation of the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie, has followed its internal rules as long as they do not violate the laws of the land. Prudence would dictate that Council should not interfere or be seen to interfere with the internal legal management of a corporation. Otherwise, Council risks becoming entangled, and I tell you, when I use the word entangled, I mean entangled. Otherwise, Council risks becoming entangled in an illegal transaction. You therefore, from a legal point of view, in my view, I'm not a lawyer, must wait and see what the Vatican determines on the matter before you can proceed. Furthermore, for the same reasons, there should not be any more work permits allowed to the applicant for this property. That said, there is another option besides wait and see. As I have argued elsewhere, these kinds of disputes are best solved through mediation. I and my fellow appellants have been and continue to be more than willing to try and settle this matter without having church authorities deal with this by rendering a legal judgment. We would rather settle this dispute through peaceful and collaborative negotiations. I therefore seek whatever support the city might be able to provide to help the three parties involved, Belisle Investments, the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie, and the Corpus Christi appellants, to reach a just, acceptable, and mediated end to this controversy. I would like to, in a sense I've said this already, but in terms of some of the questions that were raised, it would seem to me that you're struggling with what you are bound, whether you're bound by certain laws of the land to act. And I can appreciate that. And it would seem to me that you're only bound to act if everything was in order. If all the requirements that were met, that, everything from prior to the sale, et cetera, to the point where the application came to you, that everything was in order. And if things aren't in order, or if there's no certainty that they're in order, then prudence says not to act, and I would say you're not. That's my point. I do not believe you are bound to act because there is an appeal. And to be very clear, as I said in July, canon law has standing in the Canadian courts. This is why if we took it to the civil courts, they would say, well, what does the church say? Because the church law counts and has standing. It's the internal rules of a corporation, which is seen to be a corporation in Canada. Those are the internal rules. If they're not met, then civil law is also not met in this case because of sale. So I'm saying I do not believe you to be bound at this point because the things are not clearly, certainly in order. And so if what you need is comfort on this matter, there's another thing you could do, you could consider doing. We could all go to court together and get their, federal government does this all the time, right? They go to not all the time, but they often go to the Supreme Court and say, give us your opinion. Well, let's go to court and let's get their opinion. Or we could ask the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, or the Solicitor General, or somebody like that, and get, no disrespect to Mr. Leckie. I'm not quarreling with his capacities. Don't know him well enough to quarrel with his capacities. But I'm just saying, if you guys need comfort, I'd say let's go to a higher authority then, that you guys are have to submit to. That would be my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Penna. And first want to start by saying, I can appreciate the frustration that you and your group have with the sale of the property. It's obvious that you've put a lot of time and effort into trying to deal with this situation, and obviously that's sort of partly why we're here today. I guess if I could ask you one question. In terms of your appeal to the Vatican, what's the optimal outcome here? What do you hope the Vatican is going to come back and say?
Well, what we contend is that the sale is illicit according to canon law, and we're hopeful that they will agree with us, and we're hopeful, and what we asked for, if they agree with us, what we asked for is a directive back to the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie to regain control of the church.
How would they do that?
Well, they would have to exchange money, wouldn't they? They'd have to return the funds, and if Mr. Belisle would like to get compensation for other things that he's done, or the Belisle Investments, I should say, it's not him personally, I understand that, my apologies. They would have to negotiate that or else go to court.
So in other words, the optimal outcome is that you're hoping that the Vatican issues an order for the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie to enter into an agreement of purchase and sale to purchase the property back from Belisle Investments so that it can be used as a church.
Well, that's interesting language that you're using, and I know I appreciate I don't think you're trying to be, nasty with it, but I appreciate where you're going.
I'm not. I can assure you, I'm not trying to be nasty.
But We don't accept that the sale was legal. Let's be very clear, okay? And what we're saying is that what we're hopeful the Vatican to do is to say, likewise, that the sale was not legal. If the sale is not legal according to church law, then it's not legal according to civil law. And therefore, it's not so much a repurchasing as a return.
My second question, I guess, would be, you know, in terms of if the Vatican did come back and provide this directive, even if this application before us were approved, it's at committee right now, so it's got to go to council, but I mean, what you're hoping for could still be achieved.
And this is where I appreciate Mr. Leckie's presentation to you, and I think that it's obvious it was very thoughtful in terms of trying to meet the needs that we have in this, and I appreciate that. That is not what our dispute is. Okay. Our dispute is whether you are bound to act and whether you have the right to act. It's a different matter. I'm not disputing if you had the right to act and we're appealing, and if the appeal doesn't interfere, I wouldn't be here arguing this, because Mr. Leckie made a good presentation to you. We're saying, but we don't think that. We think that you're not bound. We think you're in fact inhibited, and that's the issue. That is our objection to you dealing with the matter, not what is being recommended by your staff and by your city solicitor.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to look to the committee to see if there are any questions. Councillor Mendocino.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Mr. Penna, for your presentation. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, you've got your opinion. You've done a lot of research on this, obviously. Sorry, correct me if I'm wrong. You're not a lawyer? Is that what you said?
I am not a lawyer.
Okay.
No.
Okay. And I guess that's where I have some of the difficulty is, I mean, you stated you don't know Mr. Leckie very well. Well, you know, I know him pretty good. I mean, he's a well-respected lawyer in the city, and now he's working for us. He's researched this. He's spent an inordinate amount of time on it and rendered his opinion. I'm assuming, but I'm pretty sure in saying that Mr. Belisle would have had a lawyer representing him. The Dicey would have had a lawyer representing them, and they would have rendered their opinion. So, I mean, there's a lot of legal, not just one solicitor. There's a lot of, well, at least 3 solicitors rendering which seem to be the same opinion, that we're good to go on this. Does that not hold any weight to you? Does that not, like I don't know. To me, that's what balances it out. That and the fact that even if this rezoning goes through, if you're successful with your appeal, it can still be used as a place of worship. So I don't understand why. I mean, I understand why you're doing what you're doing, but if at the end of the day, if everything gets reversed, and you'll have lawsuits out of the you know what, because that's what's going to happen. At the end of the day, it can still be used as a place of worship. Like, are you aware of that?
I am aware that that is what's being suggested and what's being put forward here. Let me answer your first question. When I say I don't know Mr. Leckie, I don't know him personally. So I just say so. I was trying to be a little lighthearted. Perhaps I shouldn't have been. I'm not disrespecting his work or the work of others. What I am respecting is the authority in this matter. And I believe the authority in this matter is Rome. It's the Vatican. And though I am not a lawyer, I am a member of the Roman Catholic Church. I have reviewed the Code of Canon Law. I have read the new commentary on the Code of Canon Law. I have spoken to canon lawyers. and I've been engaged with a number of people across North America who are in similar circumstances. So I too am confident on that. And I'm in touch with someone who is in touch with one of the most senior canon lawyers in the world, who is fighting these battles for people, not just in North America, but in Ireland, Austria, all kinds of places. So I have some comfort in what, I have confidence in what I'm saying here. It's not that I don't have confidence in what others are saying. I have confidence in what I'm saying. Okay? So, and I'm here, and I appreciate, again, I'll say it again, I appreciate what Mr. Leckie has suggested here and what the city staff put forward, what's been there in terms of the rezoning and the still could be used as a church. I'll have two responses to that. The first response is that, again, what's before us tonight, what I'm saying is whether you are bound to act and whether you're inhibited to act. And I've made my case, I've made the best case I can on that. My second thing I would say is, by approval, one of our concerns, if you approve this, is it makes it easier to sell. If it's now easier to sell, then it gets even more complicated. This is complicated enough. I'm trying to keep this simple and straightforward. And this is why I'd like we would prefer mediation. And I can assure you that authorities in Rome have told us they would prefer mediation of some kind. Okay? Because that's the way Rome works. Rome would rather that these things be dealt with at the lowest possible level. It's not us who have been, we're trying to keep it simple here. So I'm concerned that if you proceed, it gets even more complicated and potentially even more complicated for you, and I don't want that. This is complicated enough. Leave the complication with us, is what I'm saying.
Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Vinecourt?
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Penna, you made me think of a question in your last remark. You said that this is happening all over the place, correct?
Oh, yeah. This kind of thing. Maybe not with this specific circumstance, but yes.
Similar.
Yes.
Would it be fair to say then that all of the bishops and all those different dioceses are breaking the rules?
Not necessarily. You see, that's a great question. Not necessarily. Because, let me be very clear.
Yeah, but then why are they fighting it then? I mean,
well,
I read this, Mr. Penna, and being Roman Catholic or not, or whatever, you subscribe to, this is pretty deep accusations. I mean, you're accusing, this is my read on it, okay? And you can tell me if I'm wrong. The bishop of, I'd almost venture to say foul play. I mean, he had to properly follow the rules. So your issue, again, I like Councillor Mendocino and Council, I can appreciate what you're doing, okay? And I actually applaud you for it. But I think this is the wrong forum. I think, dealing with the bishop, but it's some awfully serious allegations that you've put up publicly, I may add, and I think that's a bit of a slippery slope. But if it's happening all over, and to me, I can't imagine if it had got as far as the Pope that he would, go against all of his bishops all over the world. I can't imagine they would pull their authority and basically undermine their position by saying, you know what, all of you have done, because if he does it for one, it's going to have to be all of them, even if it's even perceived to be offside.
Okay, let me see if I can capture everything you said here.
A bit much.
Let me just say, when I say not necessarily, let me be very clear. The Vatican will deal with each case on a case-by-case basis. Okay, so that's why I say not necessarily. So I'm not going to comment on whether what's taking place in the Archdiocese of Boston, although there's similarities, I don't know all the details, and I don't know what's presented to Rome on those matters, so I won't say anything about those things. Nor will those people say anything about this one, okay? So when I say not necessarily, it's because, each case is dealt with on its own. That said, Rome has overturned decisions that the bishops have made like this. and they're doing so quite regularly in the last number of months. And not just the Congregation for the Clergy. In my written presentation to you, I speak directly about the Roman Pontiff, about the Pope. And that's the authority. And then when I talk about the Congregation for the Clergy and the Apostolic Signatura, those are legal apparatus and administrative apparatus in the service of the Pope. So I don't want to complicate things, but nonetheless, just so you understand that. The Congregation for the Clergy is the first group that we appeal to. Then, if there's a decision that the bishop doesn't like or the appellants don't like, it can get appealed to the High Court of the Apostolic Signatura. And that can then be appealed to the full court of the Signatura, and then it can be appealed right directly to the Pope. Excuse me. Both the Congregation for the Clergy and the Apostolic Signatura have overturned decisions of the bishop, saying you do not have the right to sell the church. In most cases, the churches have not yet been sold. Okay? Now, I have been told by my friend who I work with in the United States, he said, I could find the documentation, I could ask you for it, but he has said there's been at least one instance that he's aware of where a church that was sold was told by the Vatican had to be returned. I don't know all the details of it, but that's what he told me. And so, yes, Rome can overturn bishops. And historically, Rome does overturn bishops. And the reason why Rome overturns bishops is because bishops can make mistakes. And they can make, and I'm not saying, and I have never said, I personally never said, or if I have, I did not intend to say anything against my bishop at a personal level. Never. If you take a look, and I would like to correct something in the report. It was summarized, my presentation on July the 14th, my presentation never once used the words, the bishop lied to us. I never, ever said those words. Okay? I am very careful what I say. He is the bishop of this diocese. And to be very clear, in our long-form appeal, I won't go on this, in our long-form appeal to Rome, I pointed out that the history of the situation was that we did everything that the bishop asked us to do. We even were prepared to have the church change ownership, but we said very clearly that, and this was according to our rights in the Code of Canon Law, we said very clearly it needed to be alienated to another Catholic institution. And that is what we seek. If it's not going to go back to the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie, what we have asked for from the Vatican, that it go back to another Catholic institution. Because that is our right. That is what we acceded to in terms of what the bishop asked us. And the bishop didn't go for that. And we're saying he was wrong. That's nothing against him personally. We're saying his decision was wrong. So if I come across that I'm making accusations about him personally, I want to correct it. I want to show the utmost respect to him as bishop, and utmost respect to all the bishops around the world, and to Rome in particular. I am totally submissive to them, and when we're challenging him, we do so out of respect for his office, not in any form of disrespect.
Councillor Koziol, you had a question?
Thanks, Chair. I listened at the planning meeting to your very thorough presentation, and I appreciated it. And your follow-up letter to this in our package raised some more questions. My question will be along the lines of Councillor Vinecourt. And I'm just going to paraphrase. I don't speak as eloquently as you, nor do I know the Catholic faith as well as you do and its rules. So the parishioners of the Church of Corpus Christi did not give consent through, I guess, the rules to the bishop or the next power to have the authority to make the sale. So in your opinion, or in the parishioner's opinion, that sale shouldn't have ever taken place. And because of that, not agreeing with the bishop's authority to go ahead and not do the proper process of getting the consent from the parishioners. You have appealed through canon law or through the Roman Catholic Church that decision. And based on that, and you're speaking on behalf of the parishioners or Corpus Christi Church, or you feel that we as council should not be able to make a decision because it's mute. It wasn't sold, and shouldn't have been sold. It was illegal, not illegally. It was improperly sold, in your opinion. So at one point you mentioned that you have made in your submissions that you would like mediation. And the mediation you suggest would be between the three parties, Belisle Investments, yourself, I guess, or your group, and I guess the Archdiocese. And then you further go along and say that Rome actually would love it if mediation happened and this could be resolved. So I guess my question would be, has anybody from Rome, like you've asked us to kind of facilitate mediation. I would think that if Rome, and I don't know which powers this is, how far up, if they want mediation, have they not tried mediation? And like they not put their hand out to let's try to resolve this? And I further think that if parishioners feel, and people in the clergy are human and they make mistakes, if they feel that this was done in error, the parishioners, shouldn't it be expedited, the importance of this situation within the Catholic faith itself? Should this not have gone a little bit faster, that, hey, we have an issue here, we're about to lose our church, we don't think this bishop should have done this? I mean, this can go on for I don't know how long. Mm-hmm. So I guess, and I keep having to remind myself, we're dealing with a rezoning issue. And I think you've grasped it well, that we are some of us are struggling here with, wanting to follow, which laws are we following? To me, I just got an answer earlier on from Mr. MacArthur. Yes, we checked. It's legal. It's a legal sale. It's binding. Yet I understand the point from your side that you don't believe it is because and I understand that we may be dragged into a lawsuit. I would love mediation to happen. However, what exactly is happening from the diocese side or from Rome's side, if they all believe in mediation? What has actually happened in all this time?
Thank you. There was a small point that I might clarify, but just for brevity's sake, I won't. Okay, it's not that important. So we received a letter from the Congregation of the Clergy acknowledging our appeal and saying that we had standing to make the appeal, which was very important. I won't go into details of why, but we have standing to make the appeal. It's before them. They told us that they are prepared to render a decision. And then they reminded us that they would prefer these matters to be dealt with the local ordinary. That's the language of saying with the bishop. Okay? They would prefer us to do that. Because that's Rome. Rome wants us to get along without dragging them in. They're busy enough, right? So that's what they did. So we approached the bishop once again, our bishop once again, and we didn't receive a reply. And according to the Code of Canon Law, 30 days, no reply means no. So that was the response, was silence. And after 30 days, the response is, no, I'm not going to do that. And so we then had to proceed to submitting our full-length appeal. Now, that doesn't mean we can't settle it. It still can be settled, and we would like it to be settled that way. It would be preferable. So that's where things are at in terms of that. In terms of expediting these things, part of it is, we don't know what how long the bishop took to respond for their request for information. We don't know. We have no idea. These things are very private. So we can't really say why it's taken this long. It's actually we're actually hopeful. We were hopeful that we'd hear something by now. We're hopeful that we'll hear something early in the new year, but it could be another year. It's Rome. They take time. They do, especially the Congregation of the Clergy, because they're dealing with a lot of these things, and these cases, and there's more of them coming up in Europe. And that's a new phenomenon. It used to be just the United States, now it's Canada, and now it's all coming in Europe. And so they're very, very busy. And so it just kind of takes time. And so in a sense, to expedite, now, why they don't come in and say, we'll help you mediate, is because they do not want to be seen, and it's appropriate, they do not want to be seen as interfering with the jurisdiction of the bishop. He does have authorities that they, for example, to be clear about what Rome has been deciding over when they're overturning decisions of the bishop, they are being very clear. The suppression of the parish community, they're not challenging that. But they are saying to the bishops, just because you suppress the parish doesn't mean you get to close the church. The church is still a sacred space. So they're not allowing a 2-for-1 deal, okay? Close the parish, get to close the church. They're saying you can close the parish. We're not questioning your bishop's authority on that one, but you can't just close the church. You have to follow the law very strictly on that one, because you have to have serious cause to close a parish, but you have grave cause to close a church. Okay, so that's where they're coming down, and they're not going to come in and say we'll help you mediate this, because that's not their role. Their role is if we can't mediate it, if we can't agree, then they'll render a judgment. Sorry, it's the best I can tell you.
Councillor Bain, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Have some water.
Thank you.
Okay. You answered answered my question. My first question was, what do you think the time frame for the Vatican is going to be? It sounds like it could be any day now or in sometime in our lifetime.
Well, things are getting a little faster because they've sort of figured out where they're landing on these things. They've been dealing with church closure for 7 years, and so things are getting a little faster. So really the longest it would take is another year. That's not expected. Okay.
So you realize that this council, if we made a decision, we have a staff recommendation, and if we made a decision, you have an opportunity, your council has an opportunity to appeal it to the Ontario Municipal Board. That's been explained to you by Mr.
Yes.
MacArthur,
Yes.
your own legal counsel,
Yes.
and probably your colleagues around the province that have gone through this previously to yourselves. So you're fully aware of the next steps for you.
Yes.
So if this council processed along, there is another opportunity for you as a group. So you realize that we're not your last hope.
Yeah.
And you realize also, too, that Mr. Belisle, even if this council chose not to make this decision, also has that ability to go to the Ontario Municipal Board, can go around us.
Yes.
Because that's his legal obligation. If we don't proceed, he moves ahead. It just doesn't mean that he has to stay stagnant. And I understand that the province, the Ontario Municipal Board, has viewed and discussed these church closures and parish closures already. You're aware of that as well. If they've gone to the Ontario Municipal Board?
I'm not familiar with that. No,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
But thanks for letting me know. I'm going to check that out.
Okay. And you're also aware that Mr. Belisle, if he decided today to stop this process and wanted to sell the church to a willing purchaser, he could do that.
He could try, and we would probably intervene in the courts and say that we don't believe he had the right to do it.
But you've chosen already not to go the civil matter.
At this point.
You've gone through the Vatican, that you've gone through canon law because you've said earlier in your presentation you chose one path because you didn't want to muddy the water.
That's right.
So if Mr. Belisle wanted to sell, you would then by going through the civil matter, you would then muddy the waters, would you not?
Well, I would consider Mr. Belisle Investments, if they were to do that, muddying the waters, to be clear. We would be trying to clarify matters in the civil courts to say that we would simply seek an injunction against it, that would be, we most likely would consider doing. And we would seek the injunction based on the same argumentation that we presented to you.
Okay. Then if you have that ability today, if he was to sell, how do you see us, this council, rendering a decision one way or the another, becoming entangled in the process later on?
Well, I'm just concerned about it. I'm mostly saying that out of compassion, okay? But to be serious, to be clear about it, our opinion, my opinion, is that by the rezoning of it makes it easier to sell, and for the reasons that they just said, right? Is right now it's presently zoned residential, and the building doesn't, really look towards that. It's not sort of suitable to transform into that. So let's make it commercial, and then it'll be much easier to sell to someone who wants to use it commercially, okay? Because that's what the building is more suitable for. So our concern is that if it's easier to sell, then he may sell, and that just gets things very muddy, and we don't want any more mud.
Okay, I guess I'm confused, is that if he has the ability to try to sell today under residential, and we're just approving a zoning matter as we have the ability to decide, I don't grasp how you believe that we become, I know it might be easier for the Belisle Investments to sell it if it's more commercial, but he does have the ability today or when it becomes commercially. So I don't see how you believe that the city will become entangled.
Well, I'm just concerned about it. I appreciate what you're trying to say, and I'm concerned about it. I don't want to belabor the point, but I also think that I'm also saying that I don't believe you are obligated to act. I'll repeat myself there. That I don't believe you're bound by the laws of province, the powers given to you to act because of our appeal, and therefore I don't intend. I can't foresee this, but we just want to not have you dragged into this any more than you already have.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Any other members of council have any questions? Councillor Main.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Penna, congratulations for taking this on, and I commend you for your presentation. Towards working towards an amicable agreement, have the parishioners thought of purchasing the building?
When now or before?
Right now.
Right now?
Yep.
Well, let me be very clear. Let me first answer, let me get that to the side door, okay? Myself and 4 others are appealing the decision. So it's not really fair to say we're representing the parishioners, because legally we don't in canon law. I don't have the standing in canon law to represent anybody else in this particular matter because of the situation. I have no standing to represent anyone else except for myself, and that's enough, okay? And we each are representing ourselves. So we're in the appeal, we are representing ourselves, and together we're doing it ourselves. It doesn't mean we don't have a lot of support from other people, but legally, that's what's happening. The discussion that we've had with other people before, there was, when all this was shaken down back in 2010, there was lots of discussion about different kinds of things that we could do, and we had all kinds of ideas, and none of them flew. And really, we weren't given an opportunity, a really fair shake to either collectively purchase it or to find another buyer to purchase it. That's part of our objection. At this particular point, I do not know what the discussions would be amongst the vast number of the former parishioners. I think if you got us all together in a room, and if we had a chance, if there was some consensus, that would be up to them to make. Okay, I am basically don't have any opinion about that decision, because that is over and above what we're trying to do through the Code of Canon Law, or through the Canon Law appeal. Okay, it would be up to them to do that, and I will not speak on their behalf and for that.
Okay, so I'll leave that with you, but my point would have been that that might have been an amicable agreement that would have satisfied everyone, but
It could be, it could be, except for one thing, okay? I'm sorry for taking your time on this, but to be very clear, purchasing it, and with the bishop, agreeing that it would still be a place for divine worship. See, we did not give our consent, even though we consented to another organization, another Catholic body taking over the church, we did not consent it to no longer be a church. It could have become, in that case, it would have become a private chapel. And the bishop would have had to decree that that would be the case, okay? So, if a Catholic body came forward and purchased it, it would only be amicable to us if the bishop said, yes, and you can now use it as a private chapel. It's still a place, and particularly for the senior citizens in the area, because that's our principal pastoral concern, okay? So that's what would be amicable, is that it returned to its proper use, which is to be a church, a place for worship for the Catholic community, because that's what it was, and that's what it is, in our opinion, is what it is.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any other members of council have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Penna, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to make a presentation regarding this matter? Yes, sir. Come on down.
I will be very short.
If I can ask you just, if I can just ask you, sir, just to come up front here. The red light is on the microphone. If I can just get you to state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Joe Chirky. Many know me all right. And my address is 220 Mulligan Street, North Bay. And I am in North Bay for 30 years. I know the politics quite well, and their councillor, Jim, he knows my son. They went to school together. I know a lot of people, but I would like to state clearly, it's not we parishioners who started the whole problem. We asked the bishop to meet with the whole congregation, and the bishop refused. He appointed 4 people with whom he would deal, and he would not deal with anybody else. And that is not the way to approach parishioners. Sure, not me, and I was a parishioner. We paid our dues, everything. There was no debts or anything on the parish. There were 700 practicing Catholic attending the church, and we proved it. We made inquiries, and we had the figures laid down, and we submitted everything to the bishop and gave our reason why he should not close it, and he decided to close it, and that is, and just that not the parishioners started the whole problem.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to make a presentation this evening regarding this matter? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Reg Fernier, 1707 Castle, next door to Corpus Christi. Tonight I'd like to talk on behalf of Mr. Belisle. Mr. Belisle has done nothing but good since he bought that building. The one reason the bishop sold it, it looked like a peace hut. Now it looks like a church. And at any time, does the parishioners want to go back into the church, all they got to do is buy it and step back in. Bob will be happy. Bring your checkbook and it's yours. But like I say, I'm here to defend Bob. Bob has done nothing but good for that building, that property, and the neighbors. He sure helped us a lot. Corpus Christi Court next door was short 7 parking spots for their vehicles in that building. He loaned them 7 at no cost, just park. And like I say, Bob will keep on doing what's best for the people of the neighborhood with that building. He's not there to hurt anybody, he's there to help. And I don't know if you guys have seen the building since he took over. A hell of an improvement. And any time that they want to go back in as a church, they can buy it and step inside. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Are there any other members of the public who would like to make a presentation this evening regarding this matter? Seeing none, I will read the draft recommendation, and then I will poll my committee. I guess I should say reread the draft recommendation. That A, the proposed official plan amendment by Miller and Urso Surveying, Inc., on behalf of Belisle Investments Limited, to change the designation on the subject lands from residential to district commercial for the property legally described as registered plan number 57, lots 454, 455, and 456, and part of lane, reference plan 36R-5315, parts 1 and 2 being pin number 49151-007 of land titles, known locally as the former site of Corpus Christi Church at 1781 Castle Street in the city of North Bay, be approved. B, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment by Miller and Urso Surveying, Inc. on behalf of Belisle Investments Limited to change the zoning designation from a residential second density R2 zone and a residential multiple second density RM2 zone to a district commercial special zone number 80, a C4 special 80, for the property legally described as registered plan number 57, lots 454, 455, and 456, and part of lane, reference plan 36R-5315, parts 1 and 2 being pin number 49151-007 of land titles, known locally as the former site of Corpus Christi Church at 1781 Castle Street in the city of North Bay, be approved. And C, that the subject property be placed under site plan control pursuant to Section 41 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, as amended, in order to regulate building massing, parking, lighting, landscaping, stormwater management, servicing, drainage, ingress, egress, and fencing as required. I'll poll my committee. Councillor Mendocino?
I agree.
Councillor Weinberg?
I agree.
Mayor McDonald?
I agree.
And I agree as well. That will be the recommendation going forward to council on this matter. And Your Worship, that concludes the business of the Community Services Committee this evening.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Lawler. That concludes the committee meeting for December 19th.